I did learn one thing today. What's going to hold you up sometimes is just really what you don't know. So we're going to start this bike up and hopefully be able to fix things. Dang it, pulling out my carburetor. I ended up breaking it right about here. So I have my new Leakage carb. So I promise I will go over the 3 carburetor choices later, but for now I really just want to get my bike running. I just realized the garage is closed. Dang it. Why? Right, so I've stolen my brother's TM34 bumper carb. Or this bike is cursed. Another thought with jetting specifically is that a rich bike will run, a lean bike won't. Got this carburetor at the richest pilot setting that it can possibly go. This bike runs, I'd actually cry. God damn. It is a possibility that it is bad gas. This stuff is over 3 months old because I filled it up back in December. But I did notice that the oil level was a bit high, higher than it should be, which can cause oil to leak into the cylinder. It can push past the piston rings and into the cylinder, which might be causing my problem. So I did drain a bit of oil, just enough so it was about midway between the 2 lines. And also I drained my gas tank. There was barely any in it anymore, but I did notice there were some paint chips in there, surprisingly. And I'm gonna refill it with some fresh gas, and maybe I'll get lucky. Who knows? Maybe it's just some fluke with either paint chips filling up the carburetor and constantly getting it dirty, or it was just too much oil in there and it was just the engine was struggling and filling up the cylinder with just a bit of oil. Though I wasn't burning any oil, which is kind of weird. What's basically been happening is that this bike, it's been having a rough idle, regardless of the jet, regardless of whatever I'm using, and my plug is showing a very rich reading. It'll hunt, it'll kind of like bounce between about 200 revolutions. So I've done some reading to try to figure out what is wrong with my bike, to get it to just run, to get it to idle. It is not achieving effective compression. Now this means that either one of the gaskets isn't working and the cylinder isn't sealing, which is what I really hope that it is, because I can fix that. I mean, there is a possibility that I damaged my piston rings with all the sand and the paint in there. Of course, having your timing off would make it so that it would fire at a different time. That would make the compression worse, just because it would be less compressed at the time. I noticed that it was vibrating differently. The other possibility is that I've damaged a valve, and this is really horrifying to me. I mean, damaging the piston, damaging a valve, that is something that is very hard for me to fix. I'm hoping that it's going to be something simple. You can see in there, there's some black sludge. And this is a telltale sign of oil leakage. That looks like it's my problem. Though it's weird because it wasn't burning oil. So you can see around the rim, there are occasionally these black marks. Those are charring, and you can see it all focuses mainly on this side and around here. At each one of those locations, the gasket didn't seal perfectly. It's where the coolant runs down the side of the cylinder. When I opened up the coolant to drain it out, even though this bike had been off for over a day, when I unscrewed that bolt that held the coolant in, it exploded everywhere, all over here, like it was, you know, boiling over. So one thing that's always good to check for is, of course, other than the pressure leakage, is to check to see if there's any oil in the antifreeze or antifreeze in the oil. See, that's all clean, and I did just remove a bit of oil, so this oil is technically all clean. If there was antifreeze in it, it would be all milky, and if it was just running way too rich, it was just pouring gas in there, then it would be very black or very, like, grimy. So I'm going to do a new test. Just made up a cylinder tester. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pressurize the cylinder up to just about like 10 psi. It'll prove if the gasket's correct, if the piston rings are bad. and it'll prove that the valves are not shimmed correctly. Because this just screws into the spark plug hole. First we need to get this to top dead center, which I need a flashlight to do. Yeah, you can do this with Kickstarter and just looking down here. That thing's holding pressure! It's not moving at all! This is good news, because that's the most expensive fix. And we're gonna see how she runs. The only one that would seem logical for this particular carburetor is vacuum leakage. The way that you test for vacuum leakages is you do something very dangerous, because the worst thing you can ever do to your motorcycle is light it on fire. So the way that you do this is you test by spraying carb cleaner around and seeing if it gets sucked in anywhere. Unfortunately, this carburetor doesn't have a screw fitting to test for vacuum. See, I don't even know how big a vacuum leak has to be. So what I learned from the first test was that it was not a vacuum leak. I'm going to go and steal a carburetor from my brother's bike and test it out with that and see if I get the same results. The reason why I'm doing this is to kind of isolate if my problem is a problem with the carburetor, or if it's a problem with the engine. If the idle smooths out, that means that it's a carburetor problem. If the idle does not smooth out, if I can't possibly get it to smooth out, then that means that it is a problem with the engine. Time for test number 6, I guess. Well, that's it for test number 6. On test number 7. Well, the idle's still not responsive. Alright, so now for test number 13. And I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take this carburetor and put it on the other bike. I mean, I have been taking that carburetor and putting it on here for tests, but I know that that bike will work, so I can narrow it down to if there's a problem, then it's got to be the carburetor. And I took the carb apart, I cleaned it out, I set the float, I did everything I could possibly imagine with that thing. Because I've taken this thing off maybe 50 times. I'm going to clean my air filter. I'm going to try to eliminate any possible cause of error, any potential failure point. Deal with this, seal it up as best as I can, and just hope that this engine will run, because I am out of ideas. I'm also going to add some octane booster. All that octane booster does is it increases the emission temperature of your fuel. So if there is knock, it won't be there. I don't think there is. I mean, I just watched a bunch of videos on what knock sounds like, and I don't think it sounds like that. Any noise that this thing is making. But just so that then I can know for sure that that's not the cause. Cleaned out the air filter, I changed out the oil, I replaced the spark plug to a new one, so, you know, that's on error. I provided better coupling to my carburetor, and the engine made sure it was all tight, everything was solid. And I've made sure that there were no kinks in the hose, in the gas line hose, made sure that it has an adequate supply of fuel to not run out. I've added a little bit of that anti-knock juice, that octane booster, and I'm going to start her up. Tried to make sure my best that there is no possible vacuum leak, because that's the only one that truly makes sense. But if it is not, if I can't possibly jet it with this much attention and this much care, then I honestly don't know. It would have to be timing, and I don't know how timing could be off on this bike. So I'm going to start her up. It's 4 in the morning now, I think. It's 5 now. Well, it usually is. See you in a little while, guys. So I guess Jason's taking out like a trials bike for a little ride. It works.